When is the right time to sell a stock? How do you protect against inflation? Financial decisions can be tricky. Your cognitive and emotional biases can lead you astray. Financial Decoder, an original podcast from Charles Schwab, can help. Listen at schwab.com/financial decoder.
Calling all dog owners. Your furry friend deserves top-notch nourishment, and Ollie delivers the clean, fresh nutrition your dog needs in 5 flavors they'll absolutely flip over. Ollie is made in U.S. kitchens with ingredients carefully sourced from trusted growers and producers around the world, with absolutely no harmful fillers or preservatives. With protein-first recipes like fresh beef with sweet potatoes, fresh turkey with blueberries, or fresh lamb with cranberries, you might start thinking, dang, my dog eats better than I do. And that's probably true when it comes to Ollie. Give your pup a fresh start this new year by letting them taste test a personalized meal plan with Ollie. Head to ollie.com/Wondery. Tell them all about your dog and use code WONDERY to get 60% off your first box of meals when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a clean bowl guarantee on the first box. So if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/Wondery and enter code WONDERY to get 60% off your first box. Start your dog's new year off right with Ollie. Start your dog's new year off right with Ollie.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Wondery.
It takes a while because, people, it's everything they do is a learned behavior pretty much. And everything trickles down from like our ancestors and how we were raised. That's how we are the people we are. If a parent is going to be homophobic, they're going to probably raise their kids homophobic, and those kids will raise their kids homophobic. So, there's a lot of deprogramming that needs to be done within people because of how they grew up.
That's CJ Johnson, the host of Beyond the Rainbow podcast, which focuses on crime by and against those in the LGBTQ plus community. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. CJ Johnson is the host of the Beyond the Rainbow podcast, a show about crimes committed by and against the LGBTQ plus community. The podcast was started in August 2019 and is in its 16th season now. On the podcast, CJ covers an array of true crime stories from all over the world, especially lesser-known cases. CJ likes to joke that people should remember that it's not a crime to be gay unless you're a murderer. As a new podcaster in 2019, CJ said she was an avid true crime fan listener, and she was quite nervous when she began her podcast. Over the years, CJ has built quite a following within the true crime and the LGBTQ plus communities for her dives into lesser-known cases. CJ identifies as a lesbian and said that she started the podcast with the goal of bringing awareness to issues, particularly crime, within the LGBTQ plus community. CJ has covered well-known cases of victims like Matthew Shepard, the 21-year-old gay student at the University of Wyoming who was beaten, tortured, and left to die near Laramie, Wyoming on the night of October 6, 1998. CJ says she's also unlikely to cover high-profile cases like Jeffrey Dahmer, the gay serial killer, the Hart family tragedy where 2 lesbian women killed themselves and murdered their 6 adopted children in California by driving a car off a cliff, or the case of perpetrator Andrew Cunanan, a gay man who went on an infamous killing spree that stretched from Chicago to Miami, where he murdered world-famous fashion designer Gianni Versace. CJ says she believes those cases have been overdone and wants to put a spotlight on some of those lesser-known cases, particularly those that haven't been solved. The fight for LGBTQ plus rights has come a long way in the United States since the Stonewall Uprising of 1969 in New York, when gay drag queen and trans patrons of the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village fought back against police trying to arrest them. But according to the FBI, people in the LGBTQ plus communities are disproportionately targeted for hate crimes. Authorities also believe that there's a lack of reporting of all crimes by people who identify themselves as LGBTQ plus because of a fear of being discriminated against, leading to a lack of social support and justice for victims. One of the first major national cases that I covered when I worked in the Washington Bureau of the Boston Globe were the murders of two women, 24-year-old Julie Williams and 26-year-old Loli Winans, near the White Oak Canyon Trail in Shenandoah National Park in Luray, Virginia. The two campers were found bound and gagged with their throats slashed at their campsite in the park in 1996. Once we discovered that the women were lesbians, we debated whether to publish the information out of concern about whether it would decrease the focus on the case. We and many others did. It took 3 decades to link the murders to a convicted rapist from the Cleveland, Ohio area. Since those days, I've noticed that many cases involving LGBTQ plus people don't get the attention they deserve. Sometimes they're treated less than human. CJ has a background in working with children and has lived in various places, including Hawaii, Louisiana, Northern California, and the coast of Oregon. CJ is the founder of the Darkcast Network, a collective of indie podcasts focused on darker topics such as true crime, the paranormal, dark history, and more. Today, we're going to discuss crimes committed by and against people in the LGBTQ plus community, the challenges of hate crimes and underreporting, what a lack of justice does to the LGBTQ plus community in terms of how it impacts victims, and the fact that perpetrators within the community are also less likely to face arrest, decreasing the amount of safety. We will also discuss the changes that CJ has seen that give her a bit of hope. So, CJ, I wanted to thank you for coming on. I first found out about Beyond the Rainbow at CrimeCon 2023. I don't even know if you were there, but I think it was other podcasters, and we were talking about, we were sitting in this big room where they had all the podcasters, and someone else had made the point that there are just so few minorities, period. And they weren't just talking about the podcasters, they were also talking about the fans that were there. And we found like one podcast focused on, crimes with African Americans, and not many hosts who were, minorities. There was Alice from the Prosecutors was there, but not many hosts who were minorities, and no one who focused on LGBTQ issues. And my friend, who's also a podcaster, was like, "Oh, do you know CJ?" And I was like, "No, I don't know CJ." And he introduced me to your podcast, and I was really, really excited. Both to hear about cases related to both perpetrators and victims who are in the LGBTQ community, because I think sometimes we don't really look at the other side of it and look at the criminals themselves, but also to hear about cases. One thing I loved about it is every week I'm usually hearing about a case I've never heard of before. And it was so cool to finally connect with you online. And I know frequently we're reposting each other's posts and liking each other's stuff, but I'm really glad to have you here today. So
Well, Jason, thank you so much, first of all, for having me. I really appreciate being a guest on your show. You have a fantastic show, and what you do is wonderful.
Aw, that's nice of you to say. You sound better than some of my reviewers, so.
I sound better than some of my reviewers, trust
Yours,
me.
right? Yes, right, exactly. So, one of the things that I have been thinking about when I first listened to your podcast, I, started with the most recent episodes, then jumped back to the earlier episodes. And in one of your earlier episodes, you had re-recorded an intro to it, and you had mentioned, this idea that you were a little anxious. And I know you and I have talked about how you're a little shy. I'm like curious, what motivated you, somebody feeling some anxiety and shyness, what motivated you to start a podcast?
Well, to be honest, I'm not shy at all. I'm very much an extrovert. But I get nervous when I'm doing stuff because I know it can be critiqued, and I worry about that. I worry about
Mm.
doing a good enough job, and I get in my head thinking, "Oh my god, I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to screw it up," and then I screw it up. It was almost like when I used to play softball as a kid. I'd get up to bat and I'd think, "I'm going to blow it. I'm going to get struck out. I know I am," and then sure enough, I'd blow it and get struck out because I'd get in my head. Um, but as far as starting a podcast, my friend Allison got me listening to true crime podcasts because I had never heard of them before. And I was living in Hawaii at the time. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a really good thing. I walk a lot. I would walk my dogs a lot. And I needed something to listen to because I was getting tired of the same music all the time. So I got hooked on these true crime podcasts and I thought, wow, these are sensational. So much fun. Like Southern Fried True Crime with Erica Kelly. She was probably my hero at the time. Um, and then I started to realize that a lot of these true crime podcasts, they did not have LGBTQ cases, or if they did, it was just like one every blue moon. And I thought, I think that there might be a need in the podcast industry for a just LGBTQ true crime show. And that's how Beyond the Rainbow was born. And then I found some other ones like Slay Queens, but I think that they are no longer recording. There were some others that they only lasted briefly.
I was just thinking about what you were saying at the beginning of that, like that idea of like in sports where you think about it too much, and then that contributes to not being able to do it. I was just thinking about when I was a kid, if I thought about shooting the basketball in the basket, it would be a disaster. But when I just let go, right,
Uh-huh.
go, I would end up making it in. And I think for a lot of people, it's really hard to like jump that hurdle and let go and go after something, doing something like this. Um, and the other thing I was thinking about, any idea when you walked in why there are not a lot of LGBTQ cases that make it onto podcasts? One of the things that like comes off the top of my head is that the funnel for a lot of true crime podcasts are what's being covered in the news and what's not being covered in the news. And I was just wondering, is it that or something else?
Well, I don't know if it's that or not, but if it's that, that's kind of a bummer because the more recent cases, they don't have a resolution yet because the cases haven't gone to court.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to ask you, how do you find your cases?
Oh, I just do a lot of researching online.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, somebody will, out of the blue, send me a case and say, hey, look into this one. And I do. And I give them credit before I start the case. And you know what? And some of those are my very favorite and the ones I'm most passionate about, actually, those cases that people have recommended.
Is it usually people who have heard about them, cared about them, family members,
Yes.
law enforcement? Okay.
My very first one that I covered that was about Ray Hainish, a gay man in Indiana who was murdered. And a fellow podcaster brought it to me and said, okay, so I know the mom and I know the sisters, and they're really great people. Can you look into their brother's case? And with that, I got in touch with the mom, the sisters, and they're still my friends on Facebook, and I love them dearly. They're very sweet. But that was one of the recommendations I had. And you just get so wrapped up because you know these people now, or at least it feels like you really know these people and you hurt with them.
Yeah, well, and I can give you actually a great example of that from your podcast. You covered the 2010 murder of Phil DiMartino, a San
Oh, yeah.
Francisco man.
And that was
Yeah.
thanks to Julia Crowley of the Consult.
Right. And Julia is who brought that case to my attention, and hopefully there'll be some movement on that case soon. But Lisa DiMartino, Phil's sister, I know
Right.
I had been talking to her before, and she was so worried because she had said that other people who had covered the case, didn't necessarily cover it with care or accuracy or other things like that. And she was so impressed um, by the research you put into it, the context that you put into it. What is your process like? I'm curious.
It's nothing really. It's very simple. I will look up cases and then I will get a name and then I start researching the name. And like currently I'm working on 7 murders that happened in a 5-year span in Texas, and law enforcement thought it was a serial killer, a serial killer of gay men. But it's turning out that it wasn't, and that maybe all of these random 7 cases were committed randomly by somebody else.
Oh, wow. And so it's like the idea that sometimes the victimology might lead you in the wrong direction if you're making
Yeah.
certain connections between people. Yep.
And speaking of connections between people, I was very lucky on that. Well, it wasn't lucky because I don't think anything's going to come of it. But if it does, that's wonderful. I was working on another case of a guy in, oh, I can't remember if it was in Chicago area. I kind of think it is. I'm sorry. There's so many cases going through my head right now. Um, but there were extreme similarities between that and Philip DiMartino. It was Kevin Kluwer, and I want to say Chicago Boys Town. Is that where Boys Town is?
Oh, that's interesting. That's fascinating because Philip is from Chicago. That's
Yeah,
oh
and
wow.
Lisa told me that, and I didn't know that when I covered Kevin's case. But Philip was living there, she said, at the same time that Kevin was murdered. And it was a Hispanic speaking man that murdered him, apparently, allegedly.
Yeah, because Boys Town it's a Chicago neighborhood. I
Okay.
forget what they call it now. It's like North something or other. But yeah, it's just a northern Chicago neighborhood. That's such a fascinating connection. The
Well, as I was covering it, researching it, I was, oh my God, this sounds like Philip's case. So I kind of got excited and I mean, not excited, happy, but just like, wow, there could be a connection here. I contacted Julia and we both decided it was a long shot, but she contacted some authorities and put them on it too.
Oh wow, that's cool. See, and I think those are some of the rewarding things about covering unsolved cases.
Hmm.
And I know some listeners prefer unsolved and some prefer solved, but the unsolved cases give you a real opportunity to have some kind of impact. Do you feel that too?
I do. I really do. I think, in fact, I'd like to cover more unsolved cases. I just think they're important.
Yeah, like when I've had guests on, and I find power in both. There was a indigenous man, Monty Frank, that I had on at the beginning of the year, and he told unbelievably powerful story of his daughter, Nada. She was adopted by him. She, at 16, disappeared, went missing. She went missing like 3 more times, was sex trafficked once, got back, got her life sort of in order, graduated from high school, moved to St. Paul, Minneapolis, and was murdered by her boyfriend.
Oh
And
my God.
there were powerful lessons in that story, because he has been able to bring so much good out of that pain. But on the other hand, also talking to people like Julie Murray, whose sister Maura disappeared, or Bruce Maitland, whose daughter Brianna disappeared, I just think to myself, or Phil's case, whether it's a well-known case or not, these are spaces where all it takes is like one listener somewhere to hear something and realize something. And I know it's a long shot. But even if we can just bring awareness to these, I was wondering, like, from your perspective, do you think that there are unique challenges within sort of the LGBTQ community when it comes to either, crime in general, or how law enforcement and the media handle coverage of crime?
Oh yeah. I think with law enforcement and versus the LGBTQ, and I hate to say versus and not united, because it is in a lot of ways versus. There's a lot of lack of trust the LGBTQ community has for law enforcement, and that might go back to our long history of harassment by law enforcement up until current today, of being harassed and kind of just made fun of. Although I do think that it's getting a little bit better, Jason, only because I know in some bigger cities they're bringing in LGBTQ can you say that word for me?
Liaisons.
Thank you.
You're
See, I
welcome.
told you there's sometimes that I have trouble coming up with words. Um,
Me too.
Liaison. Oh my gosh.
You're
Lia-
good.
okay. Officers that work with the LGBTQ, um, they work closely with them, and those officers are gay or lesbian or even trans officers. So I think it might be getting a little bit better, and the LGBTQ might be developing a little bit more trust for law enforcement.
Yeah, I know when I was a reporter in New York, there was a LGBTQ um, group of officers within the NYPD. They were their own private association. But one of the cool things in New York, when they brought back their community affairs division, which was a division that focused on, the relationships with the community, they brought in a LGBTQ outreach unit. And it's really, really cool because they do everything from, safety for seniors in the community to, workshops on how to have a conversation with cops, but also workshops for cops on how to have conversations with people in the LGBTQ community. And one of the important parts of that is like looking at that history, because I think a lot of people who are, growing up right now can't even imagine something like the 1969 Stonewall riots when, gay men, lesbians, trans people, drag queens, everyone, they were all getting harassed by the cops simply for their gender identity or sexual orientation.
Right.
And when I say that, a lot of people think like, oh, it was like, they were just harassing them. I'm like, the laws on the books also were, criminalized a lot of these things. And so, but part of me says, wow, we've gotten to a decent place, right? The fear of going to law enforcement may not be as strong. But certainly with the trans community, there's still a lot of challenges. But I also think of some of my friends who are gay men who have been victims of violence, intimate partner violence. And I can think of instances where they've been very fearful and ashamed because they're men, right?
Right.
Of going in and saying an intimate partner hit me, or they believe that law enforcement won't understand. And, one story from when I was a reporter at the New York Times, I forget what I was covering at the time, but we had this thing called the greenies.
Okay.
And the greenies were these, and it was really weird because they were printed on yellow paper, so don't ask. But it was like a collection of articles from the week, and one of our editors went through the articles and, marked like, hey, this is a beautiful line, or this story was really excellent told, or in this story, we should have done this or that. And I remember I loved flipping through the greenies because I would always get like good ideas about what to do or not. But one week they came by, and inside was this reference to a gay man who had been raped. And the editor wrote down, like, you should explain the mechanics here of how a man could be raped by another man. And I thought to myself, you do not understand the concept of rape. That was my first thought. And then my second thought was like, do you understand so little about the dynamics of relationships and intimate partner relationships that these things could happen? So part of me at that moment wanted to be able to say to my friends who are gay, it's okay, you can explain it to people and they won't understand. Another part of me is like, I am sitting here in the New York Times
Right.
with a very learned editor who does not get this. And just in case you were wondering, CJ, of course I complained.
Good.
Right. So
that's just not right.
Right. Yeah. But so I wonder whether like that plays a role in it too. Like not just the idea that you're going to get harassed, but that you're not going to be understood, or all it takes is one person who's homophobic in the entire process to, because I think as somebody who's African American, there's a reluctance in my community. I've spent a lot of time this year talking to Native Americans. There's a reluctance to engage.
Right.
And a lot of it is about like not understanding our culture, or the fact that law enforcement has historically had such a negative role.
I think you might be onto something with all of that. Yes. And it's definitely the marginalized communities.
Ready to prioritize yourself in the new year? Your skin is a great place to start. Dime Beauty, founded by a master esthetician, is more than just a skincare company. With 4 skin-conscious categories, skincare, beauty, body care, and fragrance, Dime offers simple, spa-worthy products that will help you enter 2025 with confidence. Whether you're revitalizing your regimen with nourishing products or building one from scratch, Dime makes it easy. The Work System, our all-in-one best-selling routine, includes a cleanser of your choice, toners, serums, and moisturizers, taking the guesswork out of skincare for your healthiest, happiest skin yet. Dime's commitment to clean ingredients and sustainable packaging ensures every product is as gentle on your skin as it is on the planet. With thousands of glowing 5-star reviews and a loyal community, the results speak for themselves. Revive your skin and give yourself the routine refresh you deserve by visiting dimebeautyco.com. That's dimebeautyco.com. Your best skin awaits.
Life can change in an instant. My brother-in-law died suddenly, leaving behind my sister and her 2 young kids. He didn't have life insurance, so now they're facing the unthinkable, leaving their home. After seeing what they went through, I immediately called SelectQuote to get life insurance for my family. In 15 minutes, a licensed insurance agent compared policies from highly rated carriers to find me the right coverage in my budget. I got a $500,000 policy for only $16 a month. Plus, I qualified for same-day life insurance. No medical exam was required, and I was covered by the time I hung up. Even if you have a health concern, SelectQuote agents can find you the right policy at the lowest price. And while you can't prepare emotionally for a loss, SelectQuote can give you peace of mind with life insurance. Don't wait until it's too late.
Go to SelectQuote.com to get your free quote today. That's SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote.com. Details on example rate at SelectQuote.com.
Yeah. And I think of my experience as a Black American, and we were talking about this before, that I identify as demisexual, which is on the asexual spectrum, but basically at its core in its simplest form is that I don't experience sexual attraction unless I have like an intimate relationship, friendship with someone at first. And trying to explain that and feel now, so long before that, I've always participated in things like pride parades and events, but it's been really interesting now that I identify to participate in it. But, you know, one of my friends was asking me, well, what's it like to now identify? I was like, it's just like being black. Same thing. People don't understand. People ask you the weirdest questions.
Yeah. But you know, it's okay that they ask you questions because they need to learn.
I love that part, actually. I do love that part, being able to have those kinds of conversations with people that open them up to new perspectives, because the same thing, I'm sure you feel the same thing. The same thing happens to me because I'm black. I haven't cornered the market on the entire black experience. I don't know what it's like to be a black woman based on my own experience. You know, you identify as a lesbian, right?
I'm a lesbian black woman. Oh, no, I'm not a black woman.
But all of that said, right? Like, you know, for my really close friend who came out last year as bisexual, it was a great bonding moment, but I'm telling you, we both learned a lot from each other in that. And I wish like law enforcement, prosecutors, and others took that same kind of inquisitive interest.
Yeah, it would be nice. But you know, in 2021, a lot of the big city law enforcements, they were mandated to have to take classes on how to deal with the LGBTQ plus.
So what came out of that?
I'm not sure. We're still finding out. I think it was only 3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
It takes a while because you know people. It's everything they do is a learned behavior, pretty much. And everything trickles down from like our ancestors and how we were raised. That's how we are the people we are. If a parent is going to be homophobic, they're going to probably raise their kids homophobic, and those kids will raise their kids homophobic. So, you know, there's a lot of deprogramming that needs to be done within people because of how they grew up.
Yeah. And I think so much of that too, that point, like looking at any bias, you're blind to it at times. Like, you know, when I'll talk to people about bias, especially when they're having a hard time getting their head around it. And I'll be like, oh, here's a simple one to understand. I'm very altruistic. So I love helping people.
Mm-hmm.
But because I have that bias toward helping people, I think everyone wants to help people. I think which is not exactly true. So that bias creates blind spots. And, you know, and I think it can be, biases operate in a very similar way because it's almost like poison is being passed on, but because it's all you've ever known, you don't realize it's poison.
Right. It's how you were brought up. That's the norm.
Yeah. And do you think that could be getting in the way of some of the coverage too?
I do.
People don't know how to.
I also think sometimes it's what we watch on TV or in movies. LGBTQ people are kind of portrayed in a lot of, at least the older ones, movies and TV shows as the guy's flamboyant and the woman is a big old bull dyke, you know? And that's not how everybody in the LGBTQ is. We're normal people, just like everyone else, really. We have feelings, we breathe, we walk, we put our pants on one leg at a time, or our dresses over our head, you know?
Well, and those misconceptions, do you think those misconceptions can sometimes get in the way, create a little bit of nervousness or discomfort that's easy? You know, because like one of the things that I'll tell people, like I can walk into a room and like I'm not always right, but like when there's somebody who's really uncomfortable with Black people, like you can smell it on them. You can like smell the fear.
I have come down to this. People are scared of what they don't know and don't understand. I am in great fear of snakes and spiders, but I started to get to know spiders a little bit better. I'm not so afraid of them anymore. Snakes, on the other hand, I really don't want to get to know.
You say that now.
I do. They scare me.
And I think you're onto something in that notion of fear. I grew up. So for my family, because we were Black, actually, this connects to it. Wherever we moved, particularly when we were living in the South, we just went to the most progressive church we could find. So it could be Baptist, it could be Methodist, it could be whatever. It was going to be the most progressive church, at least when it came to race. And then when we moved to Virginia, it was a very progressive church in terms of race, but not a progressive church in terms of LGBTQ issues. See, I do it too.
Sinners.
Right? And like it was all under the auspice of hate the sin, love the sinner, like that kind of notion that the homosexual acts were sin. But you could love the sinner. But I did not see the behavior of loving all of the sinners. I didn't see love for certain groups of people. So then I went off to a religious college for my first year, and I made it one semester. But one of the biggest issues that one semester was getting into these like discussions in our dorm room floors about all sorts of different topics. But one of them was a burning issue at the time. This is pre-gay marriage, but it was the rights of LGBTQ people, and I was inevitably on the opposite side of it. The RAs would like pull out the Bible and read a verse, and I'm like, "Have you seen that verse in Greek? It means something different than what you think, or do you realize that verse was completely reinterpreted when the Germans redid the Bible in 1943 or whatever?" Right? So we would have these debates, but they would flip from a debate about the actual issue to, "Oh, there's something wrong with Jason's soul," this patronizing thing. And that actually ended up being the issue that caused me to break from the church. Because as a Black American, I saw it as you should not treat anyone differently for who they are. Because if you'll do that to people who are gay or who are lesbians or bisexual, you really want to do that to me too.
Yeah. Jason, I have a problem with organized religion, and that's mostly the reason why. Because of how their book, which I call the fictitious book, the Bible, is interpreted by so many different ways by different people, and it's always to fit their needs.
So I'm guessing you don't believe in the doctrine of inerrancy.
Yeah.
No.
I do believe in God, believe it or not. But my God is a loving God who loves everyone.
Yeah. Mine is too. And, after that, I went off to the University of Maryland, and I was like the first person with the Allies sticker on the door and other things like that. But when I was at Maryland, toward the end of my time at Maryland is when Matthew Shepard was killed.
Oh.
And, I'm probably at the time, let's see, it was 1998. It was 1990. Yeah, 1998. So I would have been like right around his age. I would have been a year older than him. But, for people who don't know the story, Matthew Shepard, 21-year-old University of Wyoming student, beaten, tortured. And at the time, there were reports that he was tied to a fence, but I think that those ended up not being true. But the story or the defense argument was that Matthew had made a pass at one of the men who attacked him, and that was their defense. And I found it baffling to me to think that you could protect yourself from criminal complications by arguing that somebody made a pass at you. You know, like if a woman made a pass at me at a bar right now and I beat her to death, that her pass would not generally be considered a defense.
You do realize that there are still 30 states in the United States here that allow that defense. We only have 20 states, with Michigan being the latest one, that have banned the gay panic, trans panic defense.
Wow.
That's
I didn't know
scary.
that.
Yeah.
I did not know that. And I think it goes back to what you were saying before. Like, we really fear that which we don't know. And the only way to really, to your point, the other point you were making about educating people, is the only way to really get to know something is to try to explore it and
Research it.
Yeah, and find out and experience it and meet new people.
Heck yeah.
Well, one of the things
I have to be honest. I used to be very scared of trans people until I started to meet them. And so for 30 years, I worked with the city of Sacramento in a daycare program. I was a director of a daycare program, very busy one, on a Sacramento City school campus. And one set of parents I had, they were two lesbians and they had a little girl. One of the moms, she broke away from her partner and got with a trans man. So I got to know him a little bit. And as time went on, that lesbian mother actually transitioned to be a trans man. They are not, and I say they, trans people are just like you and me, you know?
Yeah.
They're human, they're loving, they love with their whole heart. They can be good parents and they are good parents. And it flabbergasts me that more people do not try to research and get to know people before they automatically assume, oh, they're gay, they're black, they're Hispanic, I hate them. Why? Why is there so much hate in this world? I don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to the way that like we as humans operate. Even though we're so similar, we tend to focus on the differences. And I think it's a part of our tribalism and the way that we operate as a clan to feel safe because we convince ourselves that we have a lot of commonalities with people. This all, though, makes me wonder, and thinking about what you're saying and like that idea of exposure, is it important to you that people, even outside of the LGBTQ community, get the chance to hear some of these stories?
Oh, yes. And I have to actually tell you, I think most of my listenership is mostly straight women. Isn't that funny?
No. Yeah. So the typical true crime profile.
Yeah.
That's wild. What do you think causes them to gravitate toward the cases?
Maybe it's because they like cases they haven't heard before. I don't know. As a listener, that's what I would say gravitates me towards a podcast on true crime. If I like the unknown cases, ones I haven't heard 100 times, you know?
Yeah, the puzzles that can be solved, the mysteries that can be unraveled. The one of the things I was wondering about for you, what was your own journey to realizing, that you were a lesbian? Did you instantly know, and did you face struggles?
Oh yeah, I faced struggles. I did not instantly know. But in junior high, I was getting crushes on girls. And it was worrying me because my dad was a huge fan of Archie Bunker. And we know how bad Archie Bunker was.
Yeah, I would not call him the model of gay rights.
No, not at all. Or black rights.
Anyone's rights.
Or meatheads' rights. That's right. So,
certainly not.
But his mother is a lesbian. And I didn't realize it until I was at least of junior high age, maybe high school age. And then I heard my mom talking about it, about how her and her partner had been together for years, living together, and they managed an apartment complex. Um, so for me, I had crushes on girls, and then I found an article in Teen Magazine saying it was okay for girls to have crushes on other girls. It was completely normal. So I figured, oh, thank God I'm normal. Woo! So
Nice.
I went through high school. I had a boyfriend, but I definitely did get crushes on girls still, even through high school. And then I don't think I came out until I was like 26.
Oh, wow.
And that was, I saw a girl I really liked. We used to have these things called, what were they? There was before the real internet. We had these little like community places where you could go chat 4 people at a time
Yeah,
on your
like the
computer.
bulletin where you get
Yeah,
the board
bulletin
together.
boards,
Yeah.
that's what they
Yep.
were,
Yep.
and that's how I met her. They had put this pizza thing together in Sacramento for one of the bulletin boards I was on, so I went to it and I saw her and I went, "Wow," and that actually was my baby mama. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. Oh,
and
wow.
so that's when I kinda knew, and she was really the only one I was with for 18 years.
So, what was it like? I have to imagine that the moment where you realized as a kid, like in reading that teen magazine, that like it's okay to have crushes on women.
It was just a big relief.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I was a softball player, and I'd go to the softball complex and watch some of the games with my mom, and her and I would giggle and call the more butchy looking girls shims, she hims, which is
Mm.
horrible. So, I had my share of making fun of the LGBTQ as well.
And how did it feel like in that moment when you're 26 and you first came out? Was there something freeing about that for you to be
No, not at all. It was very scary, and I think I had a little nervous breakdown even because
Mm.
I was trying so hard to hide it from my family, from my work life. I just didn't want anybody to see me out. And then I saw a girl that worked for me out at one of our gay clubs, and I freaked out. But then I started realizing, well, she's here. But then it turned out she was there with her lesbian friend. She
Mm.
was straight, but
Well, at least you knew she was friendly.
yes,
That
yes.
part is there.
But I
Well,
still didn't want her blabbing it to anybody at work. And my little nervous breakdown happened when I was grocery shopping one night after work. And I was talking to the checker, and all of a sudden I just started laughing and crying at the same time. It was just a weird sensation.
I guess you're actually kind of getting at some of the things that we were talking about it's the same sort of ethos that's behind the challenges for a lot of people in these communities to go to law enforcement or to get help relate to the exact sort of things you're talking about, that fear of people finding out, the fear of being judged, the fear of being misunderstood. Do you have any advice when you're thinking of, let's say, victims or thoughts for them when it comes to engaging law enforcement or reporting crimes? Like,
I always try to tell people to live your truth as long as it's safe. If you feel safe, I think you should go to law enforcement, especially if you're a victim of domestic violence or any kind of violence. Definitely
and is there anything that in thinking about that sort of victims can do to sort of like assuage their concerns or like engage with law enforcement? Some of those fears for people might actually be, there might be some reality to it. And I'm wondering for that person who does go in and may encounter somebody who makes homophobic statements or says something.
makes them feel uncomfortable. There's
Yeah.
always somebody higher up
Yeah, that is
that they
true.
can report them to. And if you have to make a stink, make a stink.
One of the things, by the way, that I find totally interesting about your podcast is that, and I love this when I first read the description, you've got that line in there where you talk about it's not a crime to be gay, unless, of course, you're a murderer. But before that, you talk about, and you do have a great sense of humor, but you talk about the idea that the podcast focuses both on LGBTQ victims as well as perpetrators. And I know a lot of people, like when it comes to underrepresented minority groups, will often focus on the victims and not focus on the perpetrators. Why'd you decide to do both?
Because once again, the LGBTQ people are just like everyone else.
Do you think that there are people who don't think about that, or that problem gets ignored? And
maybe, and in fact, I think it's in reverse for me, that I think people think more that there's killers that are LGBTQ than victims that are LGBTQ. Like, and even, and this just drives me freaking nuts. Pedophiles. A lot of people think all the pedophiles are gay, but they're not. Pedophilia has nothing to do with your sexuality. It has to do with a mental illness.
Well, and I think one of the things that, I think shocks a lot of people is that when the research, what we know about pedophilia and what we know about offense is that more than likely, men are more likely to actually act on pedophilia than women who are pedophiles, but there still are plenty of women who have that attraction. But almost all of the research for the last 40, 50 years has said that the typical pedophile is an older, straight, white man.
And there you have it.
Right. And, that's the scientific studies really, really look at it that way. But when you see pedophilia in the news, it's often, I think subtle suggestions that it's gay men. But I also look at it a bit like sexual assault. Like sexual assault is not really about sex. It's
Right.
about violence. It's about control. It's about dominating. And pedophilia is not really about your sexual orientation. And it's about being attracted to children. And for some people, those are going to be children of the same sex. Some people, they're going to be children of different sex. Some it's going to be both.
Right.
And how do you think we tackle some of those stereotypes? Just education?
Oh, I'm not really sure. I have to be honest. I don't know. I don't have a solution for that other than educate. That's like my solution to everything, I think.
You're an educator at heart, though, so it makes sense.
I am a little bit, yes.
So, we both covered the case of Phil DiMartino, who we were talking about before, because Julia Cowley brought the case to both of our attention. And, a couple weeks ago, we had an episode focused on his case, and there have been some progress and advances, and I would actually say media coverage has played a role in some of the advances in the case. I'm curious, like for you, what do you hope comes from covering cases like that one?
I would just hope for some unicorn justice, I think.
What's unicorn justice?
It's justice, but with a little flair.
A rainbow, maybe?
Maybe. Well, the rainbow crimes, unicorn justice.
One of the things, too, the Darkcast Network, which is you founded this collection of podcasts. You guys do all sorts of things.
I love them.
Paranormal, true crime. Like there's a great collection. How many podcasts do you guys have now?
We currently have, I believe, 33, and we're always getting new ones. It's wonderful. And all
That's
we are is indie podcasts with a dark side.
and one of the cool things about it, and I can't remember the name of it, you guys have a feed where that drops episodes from different ones of the podcast.
Yeah, it's called Spotlight on Darkcast. And
Yeah.
it's what I like to call a buffet of yumminess because it's a little bit of everybody and it's perfect to binge if you're house cleaning, taking a long walk, a long drive, because it just goes from show to show.
Well, and one of the things too that I love about it is that idea that you could get exposed. You might go there because you're interested in one topic, and you could get exposed to like 5, 6, 7 other kinds of
Yeah. All the
topics and
shows are a little
topics.
bit different, but some
Mhm.
of them are the same genre.
Oh,
Like,
no.
we have quite a few true crime, we have a few paranormal, some dark science, dark history. Oh, and with the dark science, I swear to you, it's cause of death, 100 seconds till midnight, and I swear to you, after I listened to her, I feel smart for at least half an hour, and then I have to go listen again to another one.
Like for your podcast, I don't know whether you have plans about where it's headed in the future or what you're going to do, but like when you feel best about the work you're doing, you know, and when you're sort of thinking about what you want to accomplish and what impact you want to have, what kind of impact do you want to have?
Um, that's a really good question, Jason. I don't know. Just I really want people to realize that we're normal people and shit happens to us as it happens to everyone else. I think the stories of victims are important and they need to be shared. Um, One of the struggles I do have with doing this podcast is I worry that am I doing a good enough job putting the word out there? Is there gonna be a family member upset with me? In fact, there was one mom, her son went missing in a foreign country, and he's a gay man, and a lot of shows have covered him already, and I actually went to the mom, which I don't do very often, and I asked her for permission to cover her son's case, and she was very flippant with me about, "No, nobody can tell my son's story but me and my family." And that kind of took me back. And then I think she thinks that we're all out there for the money. There's no freaking money in
Little do
podcasting.
they
I'm
know.
sorry. I know. So I explained that I'm a mom. I told her my age, that I'm a mom. I'm not going to tell you my age, Jason, that I'm a mom. And, I totally understand. I just, that's why I wanted to ask her permission first, if it was okay if I covered his story. I guess somebody had done her bad, covered her son's story on YouTube, and that's why she got so harsh with me to begin with. But then, she calmed down a little bit, which was nice, and we had a nice discussion. So for me, I think with my podcast, I just want to make sure I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, making things a situation worse for someone, just stuff I don't want to do.
What about the things that you do want to do?
I just want to get voices out there for people. I don't know that I'm the best one to put the voice out there for people, but why not? I have the platform. I'm trying my best to get these cases heard. Maybe somebody knows something and can help with these cases.
Yeah. So what it gives you, I think it sounds like it gives you an opportunity to give, you know, these people in death a voice they may not have always had in life because of the crimes that were committed against them, and possibly for some of them because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. It's kind of like beautiful to think about that you get this opportunity to sort of sing their song. Um,
I love that you always put everything to music.
I do.
That's a great thing. It is very pretty actually. Like the case of 21-year-old Alex Van Dalsen. He's a trans man. I call him a boy, but he's a trans man who was murdered in Indiana. Uh, I think it's important that his story is told because nothing is being done about it by law enforcement. The law enforcement, they told the mom and they declared it was a suicide. But yet on their body cam that I've already seen and witnessed, they said the scene was staged and he was moved there to where he was found. So, it's cases like that. If we can make enough noise, somebody's got to listen and do something about it.
Yeah, and I think like some of it too, I just as you were saying that, I was thinking like maybe part of the challenge too is that idea you said you mentioned before that we're afraid of what we don't know, but we also sometimes can become most passionate about the things that we relate to the most. So like when I'm a cop and I can see somebody as my daughter, I might push a little bit harder or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
like for everybody being able to see LGBTQ people as fellow people, I think that's one of the coolest things too in your podcast. Like you do tell their stories and you tell their stories, they're very human stories. Honestly. And I think even if it doesn't resolve a case, it's like it's a gift to the families, to their loved ones, to the universe, to listeners who don't even know them, just to give voice to them.
If I can be respectful of them, that's my goal. I just want to be respectful of the families and of the victim,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really do appreciate the time and thanks for being willing to talk to me about this. I really do think it's an important topic and not just awareness around these issues for people, awareness about the LGBTQ community, but not just that, awareness about anybody who's not like you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I feel the same way myself. Like I might be a black man, but there are plenty of things that I'm not that I need to learn, or need to learn about, that I should learn about, and that I'm better for. And I think, for all of us to just, I think maybe a lesson I take away from this is, for all of us to look outside ourselves, to go find that spider that we're afraid of.
And go make friends with them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, CJ. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jason. You take care.
You too. Thank you all for joining us on this discussion and this episode of the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I just want to recommend, if you haven't done it already, to check out our community-run Facebook group, the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. Also, for $3 a month, simply $3 a month, you can join our Patreon and find ad-free and early episodes, another great part of our community. But also, if you'd like to join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including that listener-run group. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with our listeners, you can join us on our Patreon, and the address is www.patreon.com/the Silver Linings Handbook.